My name is Matthew Wayne Selznick, and this is episode 22 of Sonitotum, the audio and video companion to my blog, Scribtotem, over there at mattselznick.com. I'm an author and creator and creative services provider, and this is a place where I talk about whatever I feel like talking about with all y'all. Usually, there's something to do with creativity or the creative process in the subject, and today is no different. It's kind of funny. I'm trying to do this every week, and I worry right after I finish one of these episodes that I'm going to have difficulty thinking of what to talk about next time around. But usually in the course of a week, something presents itself. And this week has been no different. It's a weird sort of convergence of input that ends up giving me a topic. And the topic today, in so many words, is storyworlds and verisimilitude. I just finished watching more or less an episode every day, maybe, or every couple of days. I just finished, for the first time, watching from beginning to end the Ron Moore reboot of Battlestar Galactica. Now, when it first came around, I caught an episode here or there, but I was discouraged by how sort of one note the series was. Everything was so gloomy and grim, and if people smiled, they smiled painfully or ironically or sarcastically, and laughter was usually very, very quick. Somebody falls out of a chair because they're so drunk, because they're so miserable. That's the kind of laughs that the characters seem to enjoy. Anyway, the first time around, I gave up on it. And then I did watch the last episode the first time it came around. And at this point, I think it's safe to say that this episode of Sonitotum will contain spoilers having to do with the Battlestar Galactica reboot. So if you haven't seen the series, it's available on Netflix. I recommend that you watch it. And then you can, after whatever it is, 50, 60 episodes, come back. This episode will still be here, and we can talk about it. Okay, so it was on Netflix, so I gave it a shot. And, about a season in, I was still thinking, man, this is... as I thought, it's very much a one-note ride with very little in terms of dynamics in the storytelling, and I was discouraged and thought that maybe my initial impression was correct. But hey, it's on Netflix. It's not costing me anything to keep watching it, nothing but time, and I would I'd watch an episode while I was eating lunch or whatever. So it wasn't really, getting in the way of my life to watch it. So I kept going. And while I was very frustrated occasionally with storytelling choices and bad storytelling choices, situations where there wouldn't be an episode if the characters were just a tiny bit smarter. And when the characters you're talking about are engineers and admirals and soldiers who are supposedly humanity's last hope and the best in the business, when they're not as smart as the viewer, i.e. when the writer either isn't as smart as the viewer, or worse, the writer assumes that the reader, I keep saying reader, in this case the viewer, when the writer assumes that the viewer is going to give them a pass just because, I watch this show every week, and I'll suspend my disbelief in the face of a glaring moment of what? I mean, we're talking the killer is in the basement, so I'm going to go down into the basement with no flashlight in my nightgown. Horror movie type bad decisions, right? Okay. Anyway, there were a few of those. Wow, that was a digression. There were a few of those, and that was frustrating. But then there were these moments of sublime, subtle excellence, especially having to do with character dynamics. And the one note performances started to be revealed as just very gradual growth. And so, I really dug that. Now, I know a lot of people had a problem with the Battlestar Galactica reboot because they were disappointed, I guess, in the spiritual aspects of the story world. It walked like a science fiction show, but it didn't talk like a science fiction show. And ultimately, Battlestar Galactica is not science fiction. Battlestar Galactica is, religious fiction? I would prefer to say maybe it's just straight up fantasy. Despite the origins of the original show, and I don't know, maybe the reboot as well, despite its origins in the mythology of the Church of Latter-day Saints, I did not feel like there was, I can't call this religious fiction because it wasn't evangelical. There was just as much mythos taken from astrology and the tarot and Greek myths as Church of Latter-day Saints doctrine. So, whatever. The thing is, despite the spaceships and the faster than light drive and the dog fights in space, whatever, or maybe because of all those things, we can't call this science fiction. From the get-go, and maybe this is something you only realize if you really watch the show in tight proximity, one episode to the next. From the get-go, this show was established as a fantasy in which the gods or God play a strong, consistent, ongoing, active role. So folks who complained that, everything in the end is because of God, not just at the end. Everything in the series is because of God. And when you establish that from the beginning, when you establish the rules from the beginning, you're not cheating. Now, I've heard that the creators of the show got a certain way into it and didn't have any idea of what they were actually doing or where it was going to end up. So maybe some of this was pulled off in process. Maybe some of it was pulled off by the seat of their pants. But the point is, they pulled it off. I looked with a critical eye at these episodes, waiting to find something that, I was looking to be disappointed. And, ultimately, again, like I said, other than a few just bad writing decisions on an episode by episode basis here and there, I was not disappointed. I thought the show stood up as an example of a wonderfully consistent, excellently executed, that's your tongue twister for the week, example of a story world. And there's a lot we can learn watching it as writers who are interested in constructing story worlds. Now, I've talked about story worlds elsewhere. Quick sort of definition. To me, a story world is the not just the setting, but I would say the milieu of in which one or more fictional narratives occurs. And the beautiful thing about a story world is the narratives, the fictional narratives, can be in any media, any storytelling media, but they all contribute to and take place within the same universe, the same story world. Another aspect of a story world, which may be optional, I try to include them in mine, is that the story world itself has a dramatic and thematic arc, just as the individual components, the short stories, the novels, the movies, the plays, the rock operas, whatever, just as the individual components of the story world have their own dramatic arc, so too does the story world itself. And I think that as writers, especially if you're looking to create a career as a writer and build what I call a personal franchise or an author franchise, you really need to think about how your work fits into one or more story worlds. And the reason for that is you will find that there will be more potential stories within that story world than you could possibly create yourself. And that is where the franchise opportunity comes in. That is where you can bring in other creators. That is where you can license others to build in your world. And believe me, it doesn't have to be science fiction or fantasy or anything like that. Any kind of consistent, internally consistent, well-developed, well-thought-up milieu or story world in any kind of genre can take advantage of this this sort of career opportunity, if you will. Anyway, again, I'm digressing. I don't really have any notes for this episode, but I wanted to talk about Battlestar Galactica a little bit. Frankly, another television series that did the series arc, the entire, and I'm for my friends in the UK, when I say series, I mean the entire collection of seasons, which you guys call series. Another show that was excellent and provided a series-long arc from the first episode to the very last was Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It was a Monster of the Week show, but they managed to thread an actual all the major characters had growth arcs from the first episode to the last that were satisfying and very well executed. Again, I say. And yeah, I think the same thing about Battlestar Galactica. But you must watch the show from the point of view that we are dealing with a fantastic universe. Fantastic as in fantasy, as in don't worry about the God in the machine. The God in the machine is the point of the show. It's not a literary crutch. The show is about God's plan. And again, I don't speak of God in any specific religious sense, but the God of that story world. Yeah, I've publicly, as I was watching, as I was going through the episodes, I publicly expressed my disappointment and dislike as I was going through, and I tried to mention that, you know, I would hold out final judgment until I had watched the whole darn thing. Now that I have, it was great. It was really good. I'm curious. Actually, I'm going to back up just a tiny bit. There was one character who's in the end, okay, they finally they do little quick resolutions for most of the major characters. And there was one character who had a moment of vengeance near the very end. And the last time we see him, he's just looking utterly broken and despondent and a little crazy as a result of what he had just learned and the vengeance that he had just had to take. And I don't need a happy ending for every character, but the cap on his storyline was not. It wasn't as satisfying. I don't know if we find out. We do, like, basic. It's almost like it's almost like those movies where at the end, as the credits roll, they show you each character's face, and so and so ended up president of his company, and this person got married and had 3 kids. They do a little of that at the very end of Battlestar Galactica, but little walking off into the sunset moments, almost literally, for most of the characters. But the poor chief, the last we see him, he's leaning against a bulkhead looking like he's lost his mind and he's at the end of his rope. Well, then what? We don't get to see. And if I just spaced out and they actually did show resolution of that character, I missed it. Maybe somebody can tell me differently in the comments. So, all right. I don't want to go too long on this episode. I do want to mention that I think a lot, obviously, about Storyworlds, about how to construct consistent story worlds that allow for opportunities for large-scale, long-term storytelling, whether it's across novels or a series of short stories or issues of a comic book or episodes in a television series, or all of the above, really. I think about it a lot. And if you're a writer of any kind and you're having trouble getting your story worlds to sort of coalesce in your mind, maybe I can help you. Reach out to me. The email address will be in the show notes, and I'll flash it on the screen here. This is part of what I do for a living. I help bring creative endeavors to fruition, and then to market, and then to an audience. So maybe I can help you with that. I think that's it. This has been Sonitotum, my video and audio space where I talk about what's on my mind, usually relating to creativity in some way, shape, or form. I would enjoy your comments, and you can subscribe to the podcast, either audio at mattselznick.com or video at my YouTube channel. Just search MWS Media and you'll find me. And yeah, I wonder what next week will bring, what strange forces will collide to provide me with next week's topic. Thank you. Bye-bye. This episode of Sonitotum is copyright 2013 Matthew Wayne Selznick, and it's licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. That means you can share it, but you can't change it, and you can't sell it. If you have questions or you are interested in licensing opportunities, please contact mwsmedia@gmail.com. Thank you.